Welcome back to Marketing Corner Talks. I'm your host, Dave Keighron, and you're listening to the third episode of our new professional series, where we bring together marketing professionals, entrepreneurs, and student voices to explore how real-world marketing is connecting back into the classroom learning. So we've had some incredible guests over the last couple of episodes, from purpose-driven consulting with Lily to bridging academia and entrepreneurship with Dr. Gabriella Kurtz. And today we're driven into the entrepreneurial story that's all about creativity, reliance, and learning through the hustle. And our very special guest is not only a good friend of mine, but my colleague, Chris Ricard. Chris Ricard is an entrepreneur, marketing instructor, and the founder of SmartyPantz Escape Rooms, which was one of Vancouver's first escape rooms experiences. Chris has built and sold and taught across multiple industries and now helps students at Douglas College apply marketing strategy through hands-on client projects. Chris, welcome to Marketing Corner Talks. Thanks for joining us today.
Thanks for having me, Dave. It's a pleasure to be here.
So, Chris, you've built escape rooms, you've taught marketing, you've probably seen multiple pivots. We talk about business pivots all the time. Where I'm back a bit, where did all this entrepreneurial spark start from? Where did you start from? What gave you this inertia?
Good question. I would say it started early as a kid, probably wanting to buy things and not having the money, growing up in a single parent family, I had an allowance, but it wasn't very much. So I think the initial sort of catalyst was, okay, how can I make money? And started off with paper routes. Did those for many years, had multiple paper routes at times. So that was part of it. And then that morphed into doing odd jobs because I got to know a lot of the people where I was doing the paper routes because you had to collect the money and you actually had to knock on the door, get the money from the people so they would get to know you. And so started doing odd jobs for that customer base. And then, as I got older, I got into biking and skiing, snowboarding. And so I started doing tech work. So waxing and repairing skis, fixing bikes, anything to sort of hustle. And I did a bunch of telemarketing too. I sold vacuum cleaners door to door. There was a lot of different sort of businesses and just trying things and see what worked. And I think all of those experiences, like even from collecting money from people face to face, really helped me in the telemarketing and in the door-to-door sales that I was doing.
So it's really exciting because one of the things that, and you and I both being in marketing and sales, is one of the things about going through that process of, you've got these ventures, you've got these ideas, you're trying to solve problems in order to create some capital for you to have some fun in your experiences. And I do remember the time I did the paper route when I had to go collections back then. That was what a time it was. But coming back to marketing and sales, how is marketing and sales, how does it help you in creating these successful businesses?
Sure. It was just understanding how to talk to people. And I think it's just, with all the businesses that I started, it's just understanding who's that ideal client. Now, first and foremost, who's the person that has the highest probability of buying this product or service? And where can I find them with the least amount of friction and the least amount of cost? So I think from a marketing standpoint, that was sort of the key. Once you can get in front of those people, then you can see whether or not they're interested, if the product or service that you're offering is going to work for them, what they want, what they don't want, so that you can iterate. But ultimately, starting off with that ideal client, even for things that I didn't have a tangible product and I had a concept, finding that ideal client and like with a minimum viable product and being like, hey, if I was able to provide this, would you be interested at this price?
So you talk about minimal viable products. Can you expand a bit further? When we say minimal viable product, what is a minimal viable product?
Sure. So, for example, with SmartyPantz, the escape room business, when we started that, the concept came to me through a marketing paper when I was doing my MBA. Lifelong learner, finished my MBA probably maybe about 12 or 13 years ago. Um, so minimum viable product for SmartyPantz, the escape room business, was understanding the concept. So did a bunch of research on the concept, and it was like, this sounds like something that I'm interested in. And so I wanted to see if there was potential viability. So rather than starting the escape room and then seeing if people would
Yeah.
come, I sort of stepped back and, who's the ideal customer? And my thinking was it was going to be corporate because I wanted it to be downtown. And I wanted corporate to be the primary target market, and then the rest of the public, and we ended up having tourists, et cetera, would be the secondary market. So, number of friends that are professional HR, human resource people. So I've sort of polished the idea down to like a 30-second pitch and approached a number of them. And then it was very quickly evident that I needed to change the pitch because initially it was like, okay, we're going to lock people in the room and they're going to have to solve a bunch of puzzles. And the whole idea of locking people in a room was like, time out,
Oh, that's it. I'm out.
yeah, I'm out right away. Okay. So then it was like, wait a second. So went through a few iterations, and then finally, once we had the concept, or once I brought a friend who turned into my business partner, dragged him into it. And so we kind of finalized the idea and then went back and we're like, this is the idea. This is the value to you in the corporate setting from a training standpoint. Like, I did a bunch of research on human resources and the money that they spend on, we'll say professional development activities and or just fun activities. So I was able to speak their language, sort of check the boxes that they need to check, and went back, and it was an overwhelming yes. And my business partner did the same. And then we tapped into those people, these human resource experts, and said, hey, can you give us 4 names? So we did that with like 10 people. So we ended up having a pretty big sample of human resource professionals. And it was an overwhelming, like, yeah, we would do this in a second because we're tired of doing, the 5 or 6 things we've been doing for the last 10 years. And you're checking all the boxes. Price point is reasonable. So that's an example of minimum viable product.
Well, this is exciting, Chris, because it takes us down the pathway because we want to know more about what was the actual product that and comes out of this. And we're talking about SmartyPantz. So tell us a little bit more about what is SmartyPantz, and then we're going to jump into it. I want to learn more about how you went from minimal viable product into where it is today.
Yeah, so SmartyPantz was, as you mentioned earlier, it was an escape room business. And at the time there was one in Richmond, BC. So it ended up taking like 2 or 3 months to get 4 of us organized to go to Richmond. Like, it might as well have been in, Quebec somewhere. It seemed like. So we ended up all going to Richmond. By this time had done a lot of research on the idea, and it was big in Japan, but otherwise it was sort of in its infancy. So we go to Richmond, we have this experience, and it was a fun experience, but both my partner and I looked at each other at the end of it. We ended up doing 2 or 3 rooms in that one place. And it was a lot of fun as an experience, but the execution on their end was nowhere near what our idea was. So we were like, we're going to blow this out of the water. And so the idea is you and a group of friends are not locked in a room, uh, based on a storyline, and you have, say, 45 minutes to an hour to solve a series of puzzles and riddles related to the theme, to escape the room.
But you and your business partner went beyond this because you said, we're going to blow this up. And you said, blow it up. You actually brought in movie industry professionals to help you blow this up. Tell us a
Yeah.
little bit more about that.
Yeah. So one of the first few calls I made were to friends in the movie industry. And I'm like, hey, this is what I'm thinking of doing. Can you give me some names of people that we may be able to tap into their expertise? And so the first one was a set decorator. Heidi had been with Bard on the beach, I think since possibly the inception, she was a key person. She was a set decorator, designer, set decorator, crushed it all day, every day. It was an amazing experience. We had Ben Kay, who he helped us with some of the storylines, with some of the prop ideas, with some of the design elements. So those two really worked out well. One of the X factors in the business was the props. So we were contracting the builds of the props and giving them all the specs and saying, there could be 200 people coming through each one of these rooms in a day. So these things need to be built for the lowest common denominator. I ended up spending an obscene amount of time doing repairs, fixing things that people were breaking. And then so we hired a prop person. We ended up going through 3 or 4 different iterations, and nobody was really able to build stuff to the specs that we wanted. I ended up building a lot of the things and or repairing what they had built. All of our employees at the front end of the business were all budding actors. And, we, from a human resource standpoint, I told my business partner, we need to set up policies, procedures, and systems before we get this thing going. And I wanted to pay a premium because this was an entry level job. But I said, we're going to pay $2 more an hour to get the right people so we don't have a high attrition rate. That ended up working amazingly well. We paid more in wages, but we saved, huge amounts of grief and money, I'm sure, as a result of having a low attrition rate. And so all of these actors, we said, listen, we want to support you in, furthering your careers. So if you have auditions, if you have short gigs, by all means, make it happen. Just deal with it amongst your fellow employees. So you're not a draw on the human resources. And they were like, great. They had a great job. They were getting paid more, and they had the flexibility to pursue their craft. That was sort of like our introduction to people in the movie industry. Just like anything else, it's challenging in some instances, but very rewarding in others.
So, Chris, you're up and running. You've got some interest from businesses. It seems like you've got all the operations together. You've got these prop designers. You're going to market, your tactics. What drove the early success of this? What made it a success?
Yeah. So I would say there was a lot of, we did social. We did a lot of guerrilla marketing is what I'm going to say. Well, so we had corporate, we had tourists, and then we had the locals. And for corporate, it was networking. It was knocking on doors. I don't know how much money we spent on pizzas and these premium donuts from, I can't remember the donut place, but I would go and I would get a stack of pizzas or a stack of donuts, and I would walk into the local corporate places because we were in Gastown. So there was all kinds of, tech companies, and I'd be like, knocking on the door. I've got free food. So they'd give me a minute, and I'd be like, hey, this is who I am. This is what we're doing. We're just down the street. And we'd love, I would give them typically coupons for, 6 to 10 free plays. And I was like, you got to come down and try this out. So that got people in the door very quickly. And then we went after the human resource crowd that we had talked to earlier and said, we're ready to go. We'd love to have you. This is how, the whole sort of booking part flows. And it ended up being very easy. I was the main contact for the larger parties. So I ended up being very busy with that. So that was sort of the corporate to start. With the tourists, we went to all the hotels, probably within a 6-block radius, which is a lot of hotels in downtown Vancouver, and gave free plays to the concierges. So we'd go to the concierge desk. Hi, this is who I am. This is what we're doing down the street. We'd love to have you and your fellow concierges in and for a free play. And we actually ended up doing, probably like quarterly events where we would invite all the concierges, because we ended up having this huge list of concierges, and we would shut the place down, bring food and drinks in, and have these concierge nights. And we did that for human resources as well. So we did some events, and that worked out really well. They were bringing in, they were sending lots of their clients, the people staying in the hotels, because people in hotels are like, hey, what can we do around here? And they were like, you have to go to SmartyPantz.
Yeah.
So that was good. And then from the corporate side, all of the people that came through, for, training or, professional development, bonding, whatever it might be, they would all go home and to their family and friends be like, hey, I did this amazing experience. They've got 5 rooms. I only did 1. So let's get a group and go back and do it. So there just ended up being the snowball effect. And then he's my brother-in-law now, but Cam had an agency, Eye to Eye, an advertising agency, and they were just outside of Gastown. They were in Railtown. And I was like, hey, is there anything that you can help us with? And he was totally stoked because we were having so much fun with the idea, like the concept of SmartyPantz. We had a mascot, and his name was RU1. So the name of the company is SmartyPantz, and then it's RU1. A lot of people wouldn't get it. It's like, are you a SmartyPantz? And then when they did get it, they were like, oh my God, that's amazing. We had merch and stuff too. So Cam helped us. He had all kinds of contacts in the industry, did a lot of media purchasing. So had, like credits here and there. And so he called in a bunch of favors. So we ended up getting a bunch of radio. We did resto bars. So the ads inside the bathrooms. We did elevator wraps. What else? We did all kinds of stuff, and we paid a fraction of what we would, there's no way we would have done probably any of that stuff if we had to pay regular price. And so that was very successful. The radio, we saw an instant bump in online bookings, like the moment the radio ads came out, and the radio ads were super fun. And they were on 104 FM, the peak. So it was a very close demographic, North Shore and a little bit of downtown Vancouver. And then another thing that was uber successful, small investment. Again, this was all like guerrilla market. We didn't have a huge budget by any means. Like we went over budget with setting things up, like typical. We thought it was going to cost this much. It was like, oh my God. The city of Vancouver didn't help, sort of extending, sort of how to get everything done in time. But anyways, getting back to the marketing, PR was a huge element. My business partner, Dan, good friend of his, Paul Doan, has an agency. He's an owner-operator PR agency. And he did, we probably did like 5 campaigns. And again, just having a ton of fun with the ideas. And we ended up getting national coverage. We ended up getting international coverage as well. But we got national TV coverage. We got provincial TV coverage. We got local TV coverage, radio, magazines, websites, blogs, newspaper. We were in the Sun, the Province, etc. Like it was just, we got, I'd say, tens of thousands, maybe even up to 100,000 or more dollars worth of earned media as a result of the PR. The PR was probably one of the most successful, return on investments. And then we did a bunch of social. We had influencers come in, all types of influencers. We would see small bumps here and there, but so we were all over the map. And then, I literally had a piece of paper beside the phone, with a grid on it, and it was like, newspaper, radio, influencer, all of these things. And then I would get the employees I would just get a mark, just put a mark beside in each one of these boxes. At the end of the conversation, always ask people, hey, by the way, how did you hear about us?
Yeah.
And so that helped sort of us understand some of the metrics that were outside of social that are harder to quantify.
I love it because, Chris, you're covering a lot of different things, and we talk about it in the world of marketing as outbound marketing, inbound marketing, building story, selling the brand, getting the idea, the message across, and and you're having fun doing it, which is great. But I want to talk about one thing because also our listeners need to know that you actually were on the Dragon's Den. So tell us a little bit about the Dragon's Den.
Yeah, we were on the Dragon stand. So we're just we're just about to open the doors, like literally the week that we're going to open. And my business partner Dan comes to me and he's like, "Hey, we have to go to Toronto next week." And I'm like, "What?" We've just invested, I've invested my life savings here, and he's invested a lot of money too. And he's like, "We got to go to Toronto." I'm like, "We're just opening the doors here. What's going on?" He's like, "We're going to be on Dragon's Den, or we're gonna film or record for Dragon's Den." I'm like, "Okay, how did that happen?" And he's like, it was literally like, I think a Wednesday or a Thursday. And he's like, I just, I saw this thing on the on the internet somewhere about Dragon's Den. I was like, oh, maybe I'll submit something. So it was like a Monday. They got back to him the same day or the next morning. We're like, hey, we just got a couple questions for you. And then they're like, we'll get back to you shortly to see if this is going to work. It wasn't like one of these roll calls where we're standing in line for days,
Yeah.
it all happened like literally in a couple of days. So they call him back the next day and they're like, you need to be in Toronto, Tuesday or Wednesday next week. And it's already sort of Wednesday of the week before. So I was like, okay. Um, so we took we had hired all the employees because we were ready to open the doors. And we took one of the managers with us, and Dan's daughter, she's an actor and she lives in Toronto. And so she was part of we came up, like, all of this happened so fast. We came up with a sort of escape room scenario that we brought into the den, and it worked out really well. And Brandon, who was the manager, he played one of the characters, and Cass played another character. And then, so the dragons were engaged with what was happening on the stage. You can, if you Google SmartyPantz Dragon's Den, SmartyPantz with a Z on the end, um, you can watch us get destroyed by the dragons. It Because we didn't have a lot of time, we had our strategy and our goals for growth based on, this was a new space and we were going for accelerated growth. Our goal was to open at least 3 locations in the first year. We actually wanted 5. We ended up doing 3. So we do this. I answered all of my questions from a marketing standpoint, and then they wouldn't let us, literally answer anything. They'd ask a question, you'd start to answer, and then they'd ask another question, another question. It was pretty interesting, to say the least. But we were in there for like 45 minutes. Like, they were definitely interested. Unfortunately, I think it's Jim Treveling from Boston Pizza. He was the guy that we really wanted to connect with because our idea was to franchise this. We would have corporate locations, and then we set up the franchise systems. So Jim was the guy, with franchising connections. At the beginning, before we started filming, he's like, hey guys, just want to let you know, my right hand guy is just connected with somebody in Toronto that's talking about an escape room business. So I can't, it would be a conflict. And that was like, oh my God. So anyways, we went through the process. It was good. And, but it, we were in the end, we would have completely come with a different pitch if we would have known a bunch of things that we know now about how things roll out in the Dragon's Den. But it was a fun experience.
I love it, my friend. I want to take us because Smarty Pants, great, very successful idea. Now you're transitioning back into the world of teaching and taking these ideas back to the classroom. How do you bridge your entrepreneurial and marketing experience and bring it back into and overlay that with the theory to application?
Yeah, for sure. It's I try to, in pretty much any class, whether it's marketing research, promotional strategy, digital marketing, personal selling, I always try and use practical application, like my experiences in the marketplace, successful, the successes, but also, the horror stories and things that didn't go well, because that's where I learned. And that's where I think there's a lot of insight into what works and what doesn't work. So just taking all of those personal experiences and overlaying them in the classroom to provide, I think it provides more context versus theory. And then, I think as you mentioned earlier, you and I, we do a lot of service learning where we will bring in businesses. Dave is definitely the champion in our department to make all of those things happen. And it's an amazing experience for the students, because not all of these projects go as planned,
Yeah.
so we're always, intervening and working with the students, be like, hey, this is something you're going to see out in the marketplace. So this is a great learning moment. And then also getting, a number of students will come back and be like, hey, I got a job. Cause I always tell them, set it up so that any work that you're doing, if you're not executing on the plan that you're creating, tell the client that you would be happy to execute it. Here's a contract to execute on this. And I've had many students that have come back and, they're like, yeah, the employer took us, or took me up on the offer.
Well, it's so interesting because you and I talk about this, and I think when it comes back to theory, like we teach students theory in the classroom, the 4 P's of marketing: product, price, place, promotion, and we talk about these different things. And just like you described in SmartyPantz, not everything in the plan works the way you think it's going to work. And by engaging them in these businesses and seeing some of these things and being able to test their understanding and be able to challenge it and think outside the box. So, Chris, when you think about this, what type of experience, what lessons, what advice would you give to students?
One thing that I say a lot of is, like, most of my friends that are in sales, they didn't sort of go to school for sales and, okay, I got a sales job. Storytelling, having the skill set to be able to tell a good story, and, writing skills. Even though we have AI and ChatGPT now, these are great tools, great for ideation, iteration, things like that. But you cannot just sort of do a prompt and then push something out. So writing and storytelling, I think, are, really sort of key skills as marketers to be successful in the marketplace.
I love it, my friend. Hey, this is my favorite part of this. The student. And we have a great student. We have a student coming back. Neha is coming back to visit with us to answer some really difficult questions here, Chris. Are you ready for it?
Yeah. I think she's going to
Welcome.
ask the questions. I'm going to answer them.
Well,
Welcome, Neha.
hi. I'm excited to be back and I have a couple questions for you. So first, you started off by talking about telemarketing and door-to-door sales. What did this experience teach you about, well, first buyer behavior, but then about what customers want? And what was the difference did you find between selling something face to face versus through the phones?
Uh, it builds character, because you get a lot of no's, that's for sure. Builds a lot of character. You learn a lot about yourself as an individual. Um, the difference between selling something face to face is you get to see the emotional, just the small gestures, the level of interest people have or not, or um, sort of where they're at. So face to face is always going to be a lot easier. On the phone, you really have to have that 7 to 10 second sort of introduction that's going to capture people's attention for them to want to give you another 2, 3 minutes. But once you sort of figure things out, and it's a constant iteration process until you sort of get to a point where it's like, oh yeah, people are receptive to this sort of an introduction. And then it gets, I'll say, easier, but by no means, I get the Telus and the Rogers, young kids coming to the door regularly to try and get me to switch or change, sign up. And, I give them the time of day and I'll listen to their pitch. And I've actually changed from one service provider to another based on the offer that was available. But I think those people that are doing those things learn a lot about themselves, and there's value in that learning.
So you mentioned doing business with a friend. What makes a good business partner? And what do you think about don't mix business with pleasure?
Sure. Being clear up front, 100%. We had a partnership agreement while we incorporated the business. And so it was clear what the financial implications were, what the division of labor was. And we'd been friends for, probably 15, maybe 20, well, probably 20 years at least. So we kind of knew each other's skills and, what they brought to the table. So I think if you're going to get into business with somebody that it's almost like getting married. So you want to make sure that you have a good working relationship prior to, and that you have complementary skill sets would be a suggestion.
Awesome. And how do you know when a venture is worthy of pursuing?
Yeah, the viability question is a hard one. I'll say, like I explained with SmartyPantz, it was going out to who that ideal client was, painting that picture of that minimum viable product. It was a minimum viable product in our mind, but what we were doing is really sort of doing our best to explain and describe what the experience was going to be and how long it was going to take, what the benefits were, and how much it was going to cost. So at that point, they had all of the sort of the important pieces, and they knew that they were like, okay, well, if this is anything like what you said it's going to be, we're all good. If we failed on the delivery, that would be another sort of issue.
So what was expansion like between provinces? What are some things to consider?
That's a really good question. We decided to expand to Alberta, Edmonton and Calgary specifically. In hindsight, this is one of the horror stories. In hindsight, because we thought we would cannibalize our business locally, and then my business partner had lived in Edmonton and had a bunch of contacts there, and we found a good location at a reasonable price. In hindsight, we should have opened other locations here. Working between two provinces, very challenging. Trying to find trades at that time in Alberta was very challenging. We actually ended up bringing our crew from Vancouver, paying to put them up, feed them, etc. for, I think it was like, 2 months to build this all out. It was cheaper for us to do that than it was to hire local trades, which was insanity. It was very challenging. We executed. Edmonton and Calgary were nowhere near the ideal location that Vancouver was. And again, this is all sort of, we took all these things into consideration, but Vancouver, because we had the corporate in Gastown, during tourist season, when the sun is out, it's like chaos in Gastown. So we'd get tons of walk-ins. And then because of the density, the residential density, again, within like 6 or 8 blocks, there's a huge population. We didn't have those. We had corporate in Edmonton and Calgary, and we had the locals, but because of the climate, it was just a very different market. And until you're actually operating, it was hard to sort of see some of the ways it would all play out. But to answer your question, very difficult to run a business in 2 provinces.
And my last question is, how can businesses handle unexpected challenges like the pandemic or tariffs? Is there a way to predict or build safety nets?
Good question. We ended up shutting down SmartyPantz in Gastown. I guess it was probably the 3rd wave of the pandemic. Our landlord wouldn't sign the rent relief. Our rent was like $10,000 a month. But what would I say? In starting the business, it was like on a daily basis, I was making 100 decisions that I didn't have all the information I would have liked to have. So this is the reality of starting and operating a business. Often you don't have all the information you need. So you're going based on what you do have. And then sort of like, okay, worst case scenario was this, best case scenario was this. So let's sort of figure out which direction we're going to go. So it's being able to make decisions without all of the information that you would like to have.
But how do you build that safety net,
How do you
I
build a
guess?
safety net? Well, financially, we had a safety net. We had about 3 months worth of operating. Ideally, you'd have 6 months, but we had 3 months. Building a safety net, it's, you can only do so much, at which point it starts to become extremely costly and maybe not worth pursuing, in some cases, I'll say.
Thank you so much.
All right, you're welcome.
I love it, Nia. I love it. Thank you, Nia. And again, that is always the challenge between risk versus reward, my friends. And and when you're starting something or when you're engaged in something, it's if you do you want to take it any further, or is this the end of the road? There's always the exit piece, but I think a lot of people miss, Chris. And I
Sure,
think there's
yeah.
an opportunity at one point in your life where you're going to say, okay, at what point do I want to exit from this? Is this the time to exit now, or do I want to keep going with it? And I think a lot of people need to go into these business ideas with an idea of when is an exit for me. Now, Chris, last couple questions. I first got to ask, what are you doing currently? I hear you're working on something, maybe sharp end marketing. What are you doing?
An agency with one of my neighbors, who, again, complementary skill sets. He's got the design, and a lot of the technical skills, and I've got the sort of the marketing, client management side. And so we're starting an agency. We've got a couple clients, and we're just building it up slowly. So that's kind of what's happening now. In addition to, and again, everything that I do in that agency, I bring it to the classroom. It's all sort of very complementary between the two.
I love it, my friend. Thank you. And how can our listeners reach you if they want to learn more from you, want to connect with you? Hey, maybe there's some clients that for sharp and marketing, my
Yeah.
friend.
Sharpendmarketing.com. And yeah, sharpendmarketing.com is probably the best place to find me.
Thank you very much. That is an amazing episode with Chris here. Thank you again to our student guests, again, returning for the second and third time. Nia, thank you for that, for joining us. To our listeners, if you enjoyed today's episodes, follow Marketing Corner Talks on your favorite podcast platform. Until then, keep learning, keep connecting, keep turning ideas into impact.